Good to have you back. This is Environmental Intelligence, episode 57. It's July 15th, 2026. Your briefing on environmental regulatory, science, and compliance developments that matter for Canadian professionals. British Columbia has issued an environmental assessment certificate for the Angus silica sand mine north of Prince George. The certificate went to Vitreo Minerals Ltd under the Provincial Environmental Assessment Act. With limited additional regulatory developments reported today, the focus shifts to upcoming federal and provincial consultation deadlines and routine compliance cycles. Practitioners should review project-specific implications this week for Northern British Columbia mining work. If you only note one thing today for your compliance calendar, British Columbia issued an environmental assessment certificate for the Angus silica sand mine under the provincial process. The immediate action is to confirm whether current or proposed Northern British Columbia mining projects require updated baseline groundwater or air quality monitoring programs. Track the standard 30 to 60 day post-certificate submission windows for management plans. The certificate affects environmental consultants, risk assessors, and remediation contractors working on aggregate and industrial mineral projects in British Columbia. No parallel provincial certificate issuances were reported today. British Columbia's Ministry of Environment issued the Environmental Assessment Certificate to Vitreo Minerals Ltd for the Angus silica sand mine north of Prince George. The certificate authorizes the project to proceed subject to standard conditions on environmental management and monitoring. It follows the provincial environmental assessment process under the Environmental Assessment Act. The certificate establishes site-specific requirements for construction, operation, and closure phases. Consultants conducting baseline or compliance work on similar Northern British Columbia aggregate projects must now align monitoring programs with certificate conditions rather than generic guidance. Next steps include submission of required management plans within the certificate's prescribed timelines. Integration with any overlapping British Columbia CSR obligations will be needed if historical contamination is identified during site development. The province granted the certificate following completion of the environmental assessment process. This imposes project-specific conditions on air quality, water management, and reclamation. Those conditions will drive monitoring and reporting obligations for the proponent and its consultants. No other provincial or federal regulatory instruments were issued today. No qualifying peer-reviewed or government technical reports with direct Canadian regulatory implications appeared today. No qualifying industry developments with concrete compliance or operational implications for Canadian environmental professionals appeared today. Review the Angus silica sand mine environmental assessment certificate conditions for implications on Northern British Columbia aggregate project monitoring programs. Update Phase 2 ESA and compliance monitoring templates to incorporate certificate-specific trigger levels where they differ from CSR standards. Monitor the next Federal Canada Gazette Part 1 issue for any overlapping mining sector notices. Brief clients with active or proposed British Columbia mining projects on the certificate issuance and resulting baseline data requirements. Mark your calendar for July 22nd, when the standard 7-day federal comment window closes on any notices published in the July 15th Canada Gazette Part 1. July 31st is the deadline for British Columbia CSR annual site registry updates for sites with active instruments. August 15th is the anticipated release of the next CCME Technical Working Group draft on sediment quality guidelines. August 31st is the Ontario OREG 153/04 record of site condition filing deadline for projects completing risk assessments this quarter. There's a nuance here worth understanding when a client receives the signed environmental assessment certificate and immediately asks which parameters must be added to the existing groundwater monitoring network before construction begins. The certificate references site-specific trigger levels rather than default CSR standards, yet the project footprint overlaps an area with historical aggregate extraction that may already contain elevated metals. Experienced practitioners recognize that the certificate conditions often require quarterly sampling for the first 2 years with statistical analysis against background rather than generic guidelines. They request the full certificate schedule of conditions before finalizing the sampling plan. The key insight is that certificate conditions frequently tighten the temporal resolution of monitoring compared with CSR Protocol 4 requirements, particularly for parameters linked to silica processing, such as turbidity and pH. The mistake I see most often is assuming the certificate simply layers on top of existing CSR obligations without reconciling differing statistical approaches or sampling frequencies. The fix is to map each certificate condition against the applicable CSR protocol within the first week of receipt and document any conflicts for early regulator discussion. Tomorrow, watch for any notices that may appear in the next Canada Gazette Part 1 affecting mining sector baseline requirements. That covers today's environmental intelligence. If you found this useful, share it with a colleague who needs to stay current. We'll be back with the next briefing, and if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network, links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Tesla Shorts Time, your daily deep dive into everything Tesla. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at naranetwork.com/gallery. Royalty-free under Creative Commons, download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.